my expectation is that you obviously have your chapter review out in front of you, and that you're making corrections, any notes on any part of it. That's kind of what I'm looking for when I look at your chapter review tomorrow. All right. On top of that, I do expect you guys to be doing it next to it, not somewhere else, so you can see any mistakes that you may have made. No, you're doing it. I'm telling you what I want you to do. So Danny, I don't understand why you're asking me that question when I'm telling you exactly what I want you to do. I literally just said, this is what I want you to do. Why are you asking me to do something different? Do it in your homework. That way you can see any mistakes that you may have made. You can see the work. Please just do what I'm asking. All right, so I'm going to date my notes only because this is my notes. So today's the 4th. This is our Chapter 5 test review. And this is page 264. All right, so let's start with number 7. All right, number 7, they said write the fraction or mixed number as a decimal. So I have 7/11. Who asked me for 7? All right, so anytime we are changing a fraction to a decimal, we just have to do the division. So I have 7 divided by 11. I'm going to put a couple zeros on there. 11 divides into 70 6 times. That's going to be 66. I have a 4, bring that 0 down. 11 divides into 40 3 times. That's 33. I'm going to do that subtraction, and I end up with a 7. And I can already see that I'm going to start having this repeating. All right, so because this now is repeating, that becomes 0.63 repeated. Does that help you? Awesome. Okay. The next one you guys asked me for was 20. Who asked me for 20? Okay. So for number 20, I have negative 13 and 9/14, and I'm going to add to that 21 and 17/28. Well, since I am adding two numbers with different signs, I have to actually do the subtraction. I do, however, need a common denominator. That would be 28. So I have 9/14. I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2, which gives me 18/28. All right. So I have negative 13 and 18/28 plus 21 and 17/28. So that's now my new problem. I do expect you to stack it, right, to do the subtraction vertically. So I have 21 and 17/28 minus 13 and 18/28. You guys, even though you may not have had a question on this, you're looking at your work. And if you're missing any part of this work, you need to correct your work, because this is everything that I'm looking to see, and this is everything you're being graded on. So now I do need to borrow, because I have 17/28 minus 18/28. So that 21 becomes a 20. I'm going to add to my 17/28 28 over 28. I have to see that work. So I end up with 20. Well, that's 15, carry the 1, that's 45. Over 28 minus 13 and 18/28. So now I'm going to do the subtraction. That 4 becomes a 3, so that ends up being 27/28, I believe. And then this is going to be 7. The greater absolute value was positive, so I have 7 and 27/28. I hope that was our answer. Does that help you? All right. Does anyone have a question on that one? Everyone check your work on number 20 right now. Everyone check your work on number 20. Because you could very possibly have something just like this. where you have to change it to common denominator. It's mixed number. You have to borrow. Addie? Everything I'm showing here, I want to see. So I want to see that you're adding 28 28ths to that 17 28ths, and you're rewriting what you have. I mean, you have to rewrite what you now have, because that's the subtraction you're doing. I need to see all of that. The only thing that is optional is this. I like to rewrite what I started with. If you don't need to rewrite this, if you can go right to the stack, that's fine with me, but I like to see what you now have. Okay, 21. I have 9 and 14 15ths minus 18 and 5 21sts. Who asked me for this? Okay, so I do need a common denominator. I would highly advise that you just multiply those two numbers together, the two denominators. All right, when they're that big and it's going to take you forever to find one, just multiply them together. All right, so I'm going to use, 15 times 21 is 315. So I'm going to use 315 as my common denominator. So I have 14 15ths times 21 over 21. So 14 times 21 is 294 over 315. All right, and then I have 15 21sts. I'm going to multiply that by 15 over 15. So 5 times 15 gives me 75. So that's 75 315ths. So AJ, are you good so far? Yeah. All right, I'm just going to rewrite what I have here. So I have 9 and 294 over 315 plus a negative 18 and 75 over 315. So I just rewrote what I have just so I can make sure that I put everything where it's supposed to go. And now I'm adding two numbers with different signs, which means I have to subtract them. So I have 18 and 75 3/15ths minus 9 and 294 over 315. Again, I need to borrow. So that 18 becomes 17, and I'm adding 315 over 315 to that fraction. So 75 plus 315. This gives me 17 and 3/90ths, or 390 over 315, minus 9 and 294 over 315. Questions so far? Now I'm going to go ahead and do that subtraction. Oh, good, okay. So minus 294. So I end up with, it's going to be 8 and 96 over 315. The 18 was negative, so that would be negative. That's 8, 9. These are both divisible by 3, I believe. All right, so 96 divided by 3 is going to give me 32. And 315 divided by 3 is going to give me 105. So this ends up being 8 and 32 over 105. And I think that's my final answer. All right, so that was 21. Questions on that one? Okay, I know they're a lot of work. All right, but making sure that you're organized is the biggest part of that. So be organized and show everything. Don't be lazy. All right, so 24 is the next one you guys asked me for. Who asked me for 24? Awesome. Okay. On 24, I have 3 and 1/17 times, put the negative on the numerator, negative 3/4. And this is a negative 3 and 1/17. All right, Danny, I have to change this into an improper fraction. So I'm going to leave the negative off of it. All right, 3 times 17 gives me 51 plus 1 is 52. So this is 52/17, and now I'm going to put the negative back on, times negative 3/4. All right, and now I'm just going to try and divide up common factors. Well, 52 and 4 both have a common factor of 4, I think. So 52 divided by 4 is going to give me 13. So that 4 becomes a 1. This negative 52 is a negative 13. 17 and 3 do not have a common factor, so now I need to multiply. So 13 times 3 is going to give me 39. So positive 39 seventeenths. Are you good so far? All right, so now I need to divide 39 by 17. All right, so 39 divided by 17 is going to give me a 2. That's 14, that's 34, I believe. Yep, and this is going to be 5. So this ends up being 2 and 5 seventeenths. Don't forget, when you're doing that division to turn that improper fraction into a mixed number, your remainder becomes your numerator. And what you divide by is your denominator. That I am expecting you to know. Danny, does that help you? Awesome. All right, let's take a look at 28. Who asked me for 28? Okay, so 28, we have a negative 12 times n to the third over 5 times n to the fourth over 3. Is this the one you're talking about? Okay. So I need to use my power rules. All right, so I end up with negative 12 n to the 3 plus 4, because I'm multiplying two numbers with the same base, over 5 times 3 is 15. If you want to divide out common factors right now between the 12 and the 3, that's fine with me. All right, I'm just going to do it here between the 12 and the 15. It doesn't matter which one. All right, which time you do it. So I'm going to divide out a common factor of 3 from both of these, so that negative 12 becomes a negative 4, the 15 becomes a 5. So I have negative 4 n to the 7th over 5. And I hope that was our answer. Yep. Does that help you? Awesome. All right, so that was 28. The next one you guys asked for was 37. Who asked me for 37? Okay. So 37 said that I have 5 6 times x minus 1/4 is equal to a negative 11 24ths. Is this the one you're talking about, AJ? Okay. If I was to give this to you, I would say use clearing fractions. That's what I would tell you to do here. All right, if you didn't, that's okay, but I would expect you, because of what we're doing in this chapter, for you guys to clear fractions. If you didn't, I want you to do that now. All right, what number would I multiply everything by so I can clear fractions? Alex? Yeah, I would multiply everything by 24, or 24 over 1. So the 24's divide out on that right side, so I end up simply with a negative 11. On the left, the 6 divides out and the 24 becomes a 4. So I have 20x minus 4 divides out, the 24 becomes a 6. Minus 6 is equal to a negative 11. I think I did that right. All right, so now I'm just going to add 6 to both sides. So I have 20x is equal to a negative 5. Now I'm going to divide each side by 20, because I now have a one-step equation there. So I have 20x is equal to negative 5. Divide each side by 20. I get x is equal to a negative 1/4. Because negative 5 divided by 20, I can divide out a common factor of 5. Questions on that one? Yes. Yes. Who needs to see what's up there? Yes, Cullen.
If it says that we don't have to clear fractions, can we still clear them?
Yes. So if they tell you to clear fractions or I tell you to clear decimals, you have to. If I give you one like this and I just say solve it, and you want to clear fractions, for sure. Yeah. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. I feel like ones like this, where we have more than one fraction in it, clearing fractions is really helpful. Sometimes when we only have one fraction in it, it's really not all that helpful, so you wouldn't necessarily, particularly when your coefficient is the fraction. It's maybe not even necessary then. But when we have more than one fraction, it can be very helpful. All right, let's take a look at 38. Who asked me for 38? Okay. So 38, I did have you guys change that to a less than symbol. So I have 3/7 times x plus 5/14 is less than 19/42. So this is what your problem should have been. All right, so I am going to clear fractions on this because I think it's just easier. All right, what common factor would I use or common multiple would I use to clear fractions? Sophia? Yeah, absolutely, 42. So I'm going to multiply everything by 42 over 1. Well, 7 becomes a 1, my 42 becomes a 6, so I end up with 18x plus, the 14 becomes a 1, the 42 becomes a 3, so that's plus 15, is less than 19. So Alex, are you good so far? Okay. So now I'm just going to go ahead and solve like I normally do. I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. So I have 18x is less than 4. I'm going to divide each side by 18. And I have x is less than, well, 4 has a common factor with 18 of 2. So that's 2 and that's 9. So x is less than 2/9. All right, questions on that one? Yes?
So this is just like a general question on all of these. So knowing you divided 4 by 18.
I divided out common factors.
Yeah, but so like if there's not a common factor, would that just be the answer?
Yep. So I would just rewrite x is less than 4/18. Yep. All right, so if I take a look at 39, I think this was our last one from the chapter review. All right, 39 says that I have 5/16, and I told you guys to replace that with a greater than or equal to symbol. So 5/16 is greater than or equal to negative 3/32 plus 7/8 times n. Who asked me for this one? Okay. So Colin, to divide out, to clear fractions, what would you multiply by?
32.
Yep, I'm going to multiply by 32, or 32 over 1. All right, on that first one, the 16 divides out, the 32 becomes a 2, and I'm simply left with 5 times 2, which is 10, is greater than or equal to, and the second one, the second term, my 32's divide out completely, and I just have negative 3 plus. The 8 divides out, 32 becomes a 4. 7 times 4 times n is 28n. So Colin, are you good so far? All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and solve this. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and I get 13 is greater than or equal to 28n. I'm going to divide each side by 28, and I have 13 over 28 is greater than n, greater than or equal to, or n is less than or equal to 13/28. Does that help you? Awesome. Okay, that's our chapter review going over that. Are there any from that you guys want to talk about? Okay, so let's go to some of these pages. All right, let's go to page 238. You can either go back into your book with this, or you can put this new at the end of your homework. Whatever you would like to do. All right, so page 238, number 23, is what someone asked me for. All right, so if I look at number 23, it said evaluate the function negative m minus n when m is equal to a negative 5/12 and n is equal to 7/9. Who asked me for this? Okay, so Sophia, the key to this is remembering this is negative m. That's the same thing as negative 1 times m minus n. So when I substitute that value for my m, that negative 5/12, this is actually negative 1 times a negative 5/12 minus 7/9. So when I have a -1 times that -5/12, it's actually a +5/12 minus 7/9. That's usually the mistake that happens, is that what do you do with that negative out in front of the m? Yep, so it's like -1 times that. Do you want me to finish? Okay. Does anyone want me to finish that? Okay. So let's take a look at page 244. I'm going to go through these pages because some of the stuff you guys asked me for might be involved in some of these problems. So let's take a look at page 244, number 29. Who asked me for this one? Awesome. Okay. So 29 said the tread depth of a tire on your family's car is 3/8 of an inch. So we have a tread depth of an inch. Do you guys know what the tread depth means? So if you look at a tire, you guys notice that there's like grooves and stuff in the tire, right? It's usually a pattern. You know, it just might be these hash marks that kind of, and they're grooves inside the tire. And that's where how your tire in your car, or even your bike. How many of you guys notice on your bike that it's not smooth, that it has like bumps in it? You know what I mean? That's how your tire gets traction, whether it's on a bike, a car, anything with wheels. The things where they go in, the grooves and stuff, those are called treads. All right, and you want them to be a minimum depth. The narrower they get, the tire becomes bald, where it can't get traction anymore. That's called the tread. So it's the depth of like the groove, the valley that's in your tire. Those are treads. Okay. So it said the tread depth on your tires, your family's car, is 3/8 of an inch. You predict, as a result of driving the car, the change in tread depth will be about -3/64 per year. So our change in tread depth is -3/64 per year. Okay, so that's a rate. I don't know if we're going to use it as a rate, but that is a rate. So then it says, A, write a variable expression for the tire, and I would say write an equation, for the tread depth after Y years of driving. So A is we want to write an equation for tread depth after Y years of driving. Okay, so this change is a rate. It's -3/64 per year. All right, this tread depth is where we start at. It's at the beginning. All right, so if we were to write a game plan, my whole would be the new tread depth is equal to, well, if I look at my parts, the new tread depth, well, it starts at the original tread depth, and then don't we subtract off that the change in depth? How many of you guys agree with that? So I have to subtract off the change in depth. Well, that's going to be the number of inches per year times my number of years. All right, this is the depth change. That number of years is our Y. So I would end up with 3/8. Nope. I would end up with my new depth is equal to that 3/8 minus -3/6, not minus negative. It's already, since it's minus, I don't put a negative in. So it's -3/64 times Y. So there is part A. Questions on that? Okay. I highly recommend, remember, start with a very general game plan that makes sense to you and then fill it in. Part B said, should the tires be replaced when the depth is when the tread depth is 1/16 of an H? Extend your table from part A to approximate the number of years the car can drive before it needs to be replaced. Tire tire should be replaced at 1/16 of an inch. All right, so once the tread depth is equal to 1/16 of an inch, you need to replace tires. And we want to know after how many years. All right, well, one way that we could do that is simply by substituting that in for our new tread depth. Rather than coming up with going through an entire table, what I would do is, if we want to find the number of years, when do we need to replace it? On your test, I would do something when do I need to replace? And I might say 1/16 of an inch is equal to 3/8 minus 3/64y, and I would solve for y, and that would tell me after how many years. That's something I would give you. Because we came up with the equation, and then we would use it. Yes, sit up, please. So what this means is once your tread depth gets that deep, you need to replace the tires. So that is your new tread depth. When the tread depth gets to 1/16 of an inch, you need new tires. So we want to know after how many years will that be the case. Does that make sense? All right, so let's take a look at page 251. You guys asked me for two of them. Let's start with 25. All right, 25 said, I have 27 divided by -3/11. Who asked me for this? All right, so anytime we are dividing with a fraction, I don't ever want to divide with a fraction. We always have to multiply. What's up? I'm sorry? Page 251, number 25 is this. 28 is this one. 28 is the bookmark one. Okay, so 28. All right, so 28 said, we have this sheet. All right, and we are cutting it into pieces. All right, and they're telling us that each one of these pieces is going to be 2 3/8 of an inch. The overall length of this is 13 inches, and the width is 6 inches. So this is what we have. It says, if you cut the bookmarks as shown, what is the maximum number of bookmarks that you can cut from this piece of paper? So we want to know, find maximum number of bookmarks. All right, well, let's think of this from a inequality standpoint. All right, because we're talking about maximum. And the hard part about this one is while we have a maximum number of bookmarks, we're dealing with overall length. All right, so let's think of this logically. What's the maximum length that we can be using from this sheet? What's the maximum length that we have here? What's the maximum length that we can have, Cullen? Yeah, like this is the maximum that we can possibly have. All right, so this 13 inches is our maximum total length. I can't go over that. All right, so if I was to write a game plan here, all right, so my parts are my actual, my whole is my maximum, or my minimum. Well, I have my total length of the sheet, and this is a maximum. Well, my parts are the inches per bookmark times the number of bookmarks. If I add all those up, they have to be less than or equal to my maximum length. This is the actual number of bookmarks. So as I cut each one of these individually, I'm going to multiply however many I cut by the width of each one of these. And when I add all those up, they get to this total length of 13. So this is an inequality. Questions on setting that up? I know in the section in our book, it was not under the section with equations, but if I gave this to you, this is what I would expect for you guys to do. All right, I don't know my number of bookmarks. There's my X. Well, I have 2 3/8 times X is less than or equal to 13. Questions so far? I expect all of you to be looking at this problem in your notes or in your homework, and if you're not looking at it, you're redoing it. All right, for me to do this math now, I have a coefficient that's a fraction. What do I have to do with that mixed number for me to continue on? Brendan? I do. I need to change into an improper fraction. So that 16 plus 3 is 19/8 times X is less than or equal to 13. Now what? Now what? Anybody? Now what? Cameron? Yep, I'm multiplying by the reciprocal of that fraction, that coefficient. So I have 8/19 on both sides. So I have X is less than or equal to, well, I have 8 times 13, which gives me 104/19. If I divide that by 19, I get X is less than or equal to 5.47, and it kind of keeps going. Tell me, what did X represent? What information? I didn't leave this as a fraction because at this point, I don't care if it's a fraction or not because I can't leave it as a decimal or fraction. What did X represent? Patrick? The number of bookmarks. So what would I say is the maximum number of bookmarks then, Patrick?
5.
Yeah. Yep, the maximum number of bookmarks would be 5. Or 5 would be your maximum number of bookmarks. All right, the last thing I want to do is I do want to talk about clearing decimals. I know that was one thing that you guys asked me for, so I'm going to really quickly go through clearing decimals. This is definitely a type of problem I would give you on your test. Okay, if we talk about clearing decimals, remember the goal of clearing decimals is to turn all of the numbers in the equation to whole numbers or to integers. So if I have something like 0.32x plus 1.5 is equal to 7.31. I could just solve this the regular way, but to clear decimals, I need to multiply all of my terms by the smallest decimal place value that any of the decimals goes out to. What is the smallest decimal place? What is the smallest place value any of these go out to? Amanda? Yeah, the hundredths, because that 1 is in the hundredths and that 32 is in the hundredths. So I'm going to multiply everything, including that 1.5, by 100, because my goal is to turn all of those numbers into integers. So I end up with 32x plus 150 is equal to 731, and then Danny, you just finish solving. Does that help you? Awesome. All right, that's all the time we have. If you guys have any more questions and you want to come see me, we do have study hall today. Come see me in study hall for sure. If you don't have study hall, come see me before you head to your special, and I can go over anything you want. All right? Okie dokie.